Hello everybody, once again it is Lehman Crafton, aka Zorvalachan, Less Than Guru, with another reality to discuss about the original Torg system. So we will be discussing Aysle today, which is the high fantasy realm. Both the cosm and the realm. I said realm, but actually it's the whole reality of the cosm and realm. And the High Lord of Aysle is this guy here, Uthorian, and he is a wizard. And currently, even though it really doesn't look like it, he has possessed the body of a Eilish Viking. And the Eilish Vikings are more the fantasy type trope with the horned helmets, not historical Vikings, but they still do raids and have long ships and things like that. But Uthorian's backstory is one that I've always personally disliked, and it's because if you've seen my other videos, you know that I really love fantasy, so I really loved Aysle. But they made Uthorian, in my opinion, a complete buffoon. Even as much as bad things happened to Barak and him becoming kind of a caricature and laughing stock, they did it even more with Uthorian. And even novels that he was in, they made him, as time went on, even worse and worse. To the effect of, this is absolutely not my opinion, it is in the novels. There is a novel called Interview with Evil that supposedly is the Gaunt Man's history. And you're always left as the Gaunt Man a trustworthy narrator or not. Maybe he's not and he lied about everything. But they have Uthorian presented, and they have him in a cosm that the Gaunt Man invades, and it's a cosm that has shapeshifters and also normal humans, and the shapeshifters are kind of like the top tier citizens, and the secondary citizens are the ones who can't shape change, and they have Uthorian as one of these non-shape changers, and they have him do a spell towards the end. And they really just have the Gaunt Man thinking or speaking to as a narrator, saying like, oh, he actually was able to cast a spell. I would never have expected this idiot to cast this spell. And I am paraphrasing, I'm not reading it from the book, but I can't believe he actually has the intelligence to cast a spell. And then a second later, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, as the spells had components, and Uthorian had cast a fireball, and the component of that is a small piece of burning pitch, and they have him catch himself on fire, basically. And it's just something that they kind of went through, and I personally didn't like it in my Paraverse, my Cosm. I have him completely different. They had it basically when he knew the Gaunt Man. The Gaunt Man decided to make him a lieutenant, and over time he found another darkness device and gave this darkness device to Uthorian. Uthorian then invaded Aysle with the help of the Gaunt Man, because he always needs help because he's an idiot, and he basically kind of took over Aysle, the high fantasy world. And one of the weird things, and I'm sure some people might think it's a great story, but I never understood the need. He took over the queen, the good queen of Aysle, Pela Ardeni, and he took over her body and then pretended to be her for hundreds of years, and did invasions of other cosms as if he was her. And I just never quite understood that. If you're this big dark person with all this power, why couldn't he just be out in the open ruler of a dark fantasy realm? So I thought that was always kind of strange. that he did that, and then at some point he had to leave her body, and that's when he went to the Viking body. And even later within the plot, he got kicked out of the Viking body, he got put into a dragon body, and then he was slain, and the High Lord became somebody completely different. It actually became a shadow version of this character, Talwyn Trankard, who was like a paladin who died, and fighting a dragon-like being known as the Caridin that was kind of known in Aysle, but it was a Rorsch horror nightmare of the Gauntmans, and basically she was kind of resurrected in a body. A woman on Core Earth died, and her soul went into this body, and then it kind of, after a while, it slowly changed into Talwyn Trankard again, and she is the one that named Storm Knights, as I told you in my general setting video, that they're known as Stormers. PCs and people that have the ability to store and use possibility energy are known as Stormers, and she's the one that did not like that, and came up with basically coined the term Storm Knights. So she was a very important character, and this is one of the things that, as I said, during the span of writing and adventures and Infiniverse stuff, things happened that I was not aware of because I did not participate with that. And even with having basically almost all the books, all the novels, and all the Infiniverses, as I showed you that huge binder that I have that I've printed everything off in, I never quite understood what happened or how it happened exactly. But from my recollection, a dark part of her became the Dark Warrior, and that became the new High Lord. And I just always felt that they took Uthorian and made him a bumbling fool, and basically he basically rode the coattails of the Gaunt Man, and the fact that he had conquered other cosms, and he even at the beginning, the stories and stuff set him and another High Lord up as kind of friends who helped each other and had an alliance, and they would invade other realities, and sometimes one would take a savior and one would take the villain role just for fun, kind of like playing chess or something with your best friend, but it's on a different cosm and you're both draining it of possibilities. And they kind of took that and just turned him into somebody who could do that, who could play a chess game with another High Lord, and they turned him into a bumbling fool. And that's something that always irked me because I love fantasy, high fantasy so much. It's my favorite genre in role playing. My first character in Torg because of that, and that was one of the things that they had a high fantasy world come into Torg, was for those people who were used to D&D or other fantasy-based RPGs, because at that time that was kind of, and it is still somewhat the kind of like the core, the standard of RPGs, tabletop games. So it was very easy for players, if they didn't want to just be, hey, you're from Earth, if they wanted to do something else, they could go here. So that's kind of the overall story of Aysle. The cosm of Aysle was kind of a donut-shaped world that the sun came up through the center and set and stuff, and it had like middle grounds, and it has this book goes into a long, deep dive into the actual cosm itself. Most of the source books actually did. They went into structures of the cosm, so that if you wanted to just play in that cosm, you could play in that cosm and not worry about Core Earth, not worry about the possibility wars or anything like that. Torg Eternity went a completely different way. They want to focus on Core Earth, so they talk about core, like what's happening with that realm and areas close to it in Core Earth, what the High Lord wants to do on Core Earth. but they don't really do so much with the cosm, the source material. These books went really deep in depth. They have houses. You could have Game of Thrones type intrigue using Aysle if you wanted to go that way. You could go adventuring parties if you want to go that way, like standard D&D. Just anything high fantasy you could do with Aysle. In mixed zones even, they have like giants. You can play giants and elves and things like that. They had like stock market dwarves and things, basically just any mixed zones that might have core Earth and Aysle reality, you'd get some weird type of combinations. And they had dwarves, as I just mentioned. So you could kind of all the fantasy tropes of races and classes, and then on core Earth in mixed zones, you could get a mixture of both stuff on Earth and high fantasy. The axioms for Aysle, the tech axiom is 15, which is kind of late Middle Ages and early Renaissance. Primitive firearms, or not even like super primitive, because they have wheel locks. So up to wheel lock firearms are possible. There's still swords and armor and things like that. But that's basically the tech. The spirit is 16, so that's pretty good. It's just a little bit under, say, the Nile Empire. And your clerics, your priests in this book are very much kind of D&D-ish styled after. And the magic is 18. The magic is the highest magic of the invading realms. And it's at a point where you get different things that you can do magically that you might not be able to do in other realms. One of those things is everybody from Aysle is born under a astrological alignment that, depending on the month, the day, and it has rules to roll, everybody gains an innate magic ability and an innate they have different things like called they're basically groups, and you get one of those. So any Aysle person, no matter what type of template you choose, has a possibility of learning spells in the future, and you already have you already have one of the four skills, so you could actually put possibility energy at the beginning while making character and start off with spells. The world is one that minor magic is commonplace. And when I say minor magic, I don't mean like magic items for adventuring groups, but magic items for actually like helping around the household and the farm and things like that. So your say your shepherd, they might have a magic pair of sheep shears that automatically, that go without them having to do that. Or you might have, a well that automatically pumps water, or an iron that you don't have to heat up. You can just iron your clothes with it. Just small little things like that. A lot of things that we might use technology for, they had a magic equivalent. So that's something that's always interesting. And of course it does have, the staples of magic for adventuring parties, swords and bows and armor and things like that. The magic also, like I said, it's the most developed. There were various ways to cast spells and stuff. The primary Torg system of casting spells, which I'll get into the mechanics later, but it's a certain system. You have a difficulty, you have to beat that difficulty. If you beat it, the spell goes off, but then it had a backlash a value. If you did not beat that, then you could still get the spell off, but you took some damage, or you might fail and take a lot of damage, knock yourself out, kill yourself even. I think I mentioned in previous videos that they had a casting on the fly. So if you did not know a spell, you could instantly invent a spell. And when I say instantly, I mean you could go through this 46-step process of spell design and do it right then and there. It took a long time. I personally never had anybody even attempt it during a game session, but if you had people that really understood the spell creation system, they could do that. Now, casting on the fly did have a lot of negatives. You were much more likely to get that backlash and kill yourself, and actually one of the little in-character quips, it's either in this book or in Pixod's Practical Grimoire, which is a spell compilation book, as well as how to do the spell creation, basically says that casting on the fly is wizards committing suicide. They also had a form that was similar to D&D, Vancian magic, where you can impress the magic into your mind. You could already have it cast. You could have taken that backlash. If you had it, you could prep it in your mind, and then all it had to do was get cast, and then it kind of left. And they also had things where you could kind of make magic items. You can embed that item or that spell into an item to be cast. So that was always interesting, that there was multiple ways to do spell magic in Aysle, and that base magic is kind of what the base magic of all the worlds were, and they just got tweaked depending on the flavor of that reality. But in Aysle, it is a high fantasy. The miracles, like I said, you had a pantheon of good, evil, neutral-ish type deities that you could be a priest of and invoke miracles that were real good. My first character was one of a priestess of Dunad, which is the god of magic of Aysle, kind of the main good god, and it's a fun system, very, very different than magic in original Torg, and it's just kind of cool. So tech is 15, magic is 18, spirit is 16, and social is 18, which is kind of a Middle Ages type social type structures that you could understand and do things kind of on that level. So it's the high fantasy realm. One of the things, like I said, different realities sometimes had extra books that went with it. So this was the Pixod's Practical Grimoire, which was a book that was just filled with spells. They were supposed to be kind of like optimized spells from normal spells. And both this book and this book have spell creation systems. And from what I remember, they're the same. It's just this explains it a little better. And there is a spell laboratory worksheet, actually. So here you have a spell laboratory worksheet, and here it's the same result, but it's kind of set up a little differently. So as you see, it's set up differently, but it was kind of the same process. It's just they explained it a little better here. I remember when I went in this one and was reading it, I was very, very confused. And here they actually kind of give you a step-by-step example of doing a spell. Now, not all of the language is clear, and that's why I made my own magic spell creation thing, where I went along with this and I created my own spell, and I went step by step and made sure that everything matched. So my spell matched the example spell, matched, you know, the writing in here and the worksheets. There's an interesting diagram which has all these different types of magic paths that you could do. Maybe it's in the main book. Ooh. So you have this, and it looks all complicated, but you followed like the arrows, and then you have like numbers between it, and those numbers were different values that you would write down. They might add to each other, or they might do things, but I don't want to really get into the spell design, creating a spell. But there's this whole chart that you would figure out if you want to say turn somebody, petrify them, turn them to stone. You might have to start where the human is, and then figure out how to end up on Earth. Earth being the element of rocks and stone, and then figure out how to get there, and add up numbers and things like that, which is very, very ingenious. And it was, and I'll say it's close to perfect. And I won't say it's perfect for two reasons. One is because I don't consider anything to be absolutely perfect, and two is the person who created the spell, the PC or NPC, there was a lot of fiddly parts with spending possibility energy to boost your rolls. So you could have two people with the exact same knowledges and skills making the exact same spell, or the same person who did it on 2 different days, and depending on what they roll, you could have very different difficulty numbers and backlash numbers and things like that. And that was one of the things where I did figure out how I wanted to limit certain things. In original Torg, I believe you had no limit to how many you didn't have a limit to how many hero and drama cards you could play. So if you as a game master allowed people to play cards while creating spells, like you would deal out all the cards before the adventure, and then people would use them, and they wouldn't have it for the event. They wouldn't start off with those for the adventure, but they had already used them. You could boost those higher, and so there was always that. So there were certain safeguard methods to keep things from being completely out of control. But it did have I believe it had pretty much all the spells from all the other games or all the other settings in here, and that was very easy. So you could use this book for the other realms. You didn't have to only have this book for Aysle. So this was a good book for if you had a pulp sorcerer who used the magic skills and wasn't just imitating pulp powers. You could use it for kind of the occult type mage from Aurorish, or even cyber people like witches could use this book. So it was a very good and handy book that could be used anything except for maybe Nippon Tech and Living Land, which the magic axiom was so low you wouldn't even think about making a mage, a wizard type character from there. The other thing that Aysle had for game masters was they had 3 different creature books, and Creatures of Aysle was one of those. And one of the things I really enjoyed about the creatures book that Torg had, besides having pretty interesting creatures and stuff, is every creature would have a black and white photo of what the creature was, and then over here they would show in the cosm, what they call the domain, where those creatures might be found, as well as on the realm where they might be found. And then you had a picture of like a human-sized person, and then the creature, so you could kind of get a size chart comparison, which I always thought was really interesting. And then at the back, you would even get kind of all the creatures and how large or small they were in comparison to other creatures. So that was always kind of, and it always helped. It was a very helpful thing. So no matter what you had kind of like an overall picture, where it was in the cosm, the realm, and then a size comparison to around a human-sized person. That, I believe, was the Elven Dragon Rider picture there. But that was Aysle. Aysle was high fantasy. I loved Aysle. I loved Aysle. Oh, the other thing with the original Aysle is those stally bound areas. Aysle, I forgot to go through world laws. World laws where there was a law of darkness and a law of light. And basically, it wasn't quite morality of absolute good, absolute evil, but it was things that you had honor and corruption. And the Aysle corruption is different than in the future when we discuss Rorsch corruption. But they were skills, but they weren't skills that you could use your possibility energy to advance as advancement currency. You had to do honorable or corrupt things while in the realm, and then there was a difficulty number that you would beat. You'd make a test versus either your honor or corruption, and if you did a corrupt act and you were honorable, you could only have one of the skills. It might lower a skill instead of raise it. If you were honorable, if you had honor and you had an honorable, if you did an honorable act, you had a role that you could do, and it could be modified on how good or how how honorable that act would be. If it was just something small, it might even have a negative. If it was something really tremendously honorable, then it would have a bonus, and if you succeeded, then your ads bumped up, and as your ads went up, you gained different things. You could gain bonuses to your melee weapons. You could get a bonus to a faith. You could learn a miracle. It had a whole chart of what could happen when you raised honor, and the same thing with corruption. And the thing with honor and corruption, it took that what I would say, like grim fairy tale type thing, where good people who are honorable were beautiful, and bad people who are corrupt were ugly, for lack of a better word. And the more good you did, the more beautiful you became. The higher your honor skill was, the more beautiful you were, and the uglier you would be, the more corrupt you were. But Uthorian, as the High Lord, what he was able to do is he was able to exert his darkness device and kind of divert that ugliness. So instead of the ugliness showing up on people, it went to the land, so the land would be evil and twisted. So there was this whole thing of the stale bounds. Some of them were dark and some of them were light. So in the dark ones, instead of people being corrupt, or the people that were corrupt, instead of them looking ugly, the land looked ugly and twisted and dark and nasty, and they looked fine, maybe even beautiful. Maybe it was a reverse. Whereas in the light areas of Aysle, the light triangles, then that corruption would be apparent on the person. And one of the things that Storm Knights were able to do is they were maybe able to flip those dark zones to light and kind of show the corruption that was out there. And that's kind of an interesting way to go about the realm. It was known as the patchwork realm, because each of the little stale bound triangles, some were light and some were dark. So depending on where you were, you could do that. So that was like the law of honor and corruption, the law of light and dark. They had a law of observation, which is what I can see is real. So if you see a magic spell, then it's real. That type of thing. So those were kind of the world laws of Aysle. Again, one of the things that was interesting, and your benefit of being from Aysle, if not directly applied to the world laws, honor or corruption, depending on which way you went, could give you benefits in other realms, because you carried that with you. The other thing was the inherent magic that you might have, and if you rolled really well, you could start off with some pretty good, a pretty good skill, and one of the good skills and one of the good groupings, and have potential to help. And if you were a mage, that was just a little bonus that you got, something that you didn't have to put starting points into. So Aysle was the third realm that the source book they released. So each one kind of built on the other, and they were kind of figuring out what to do. And whereas the what do I want to say, Nile Empire gave that possibility energy to add a little bit more to it. Aysle had one that you didn't have to. You just kept honor, and you just kept that innate magic that you knew. So I want to say that that is pretty much what I have for Aysle. It was the high fantasy. It did have lower firearms, wheel lock. Firearms were in the game, and it was magic and priestly, divine type. It had really solid foundations for those. Anybody again who knows anything about D&D could be pretty comfortable in this game. And you could have that wizard who just took the base spells that were that were presented in the source book, or look through this grimoire that had many more spells and kind of just leave it at that. Or if you felt like you wanted to deep dive into the spell creation system, you could create your own spells, which was awesome. So that is Aysle. And next time, I believe I will be doing the Cyber Papacy. So stay tuned, and that will be next time. Once again, I am Lehman Crafton, aka Zorval Chan, Less Than Guru, and I will see you later.